Hey guys, this is Coach Carr with the Basketball MC. I'm really fortunate to get to share this screen with Chris Oliver. He runs Basketball Immersion. I can as a young coach I can vouch for this. I've used this many times. I've been on his Instagram is the depth of knowledge that's in there. So I'm personally really excited to be able to take some notes down. So without further ado, Coach Oliver, thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to you and shut up and listen.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the Basketball Embassy and Coach's Clinic and Coach Tube, obviously, for hosting and allowing me to have this opportunity. I'm grateful and humbled to be here to share the game. I want to make this as much as possible, as interactive as possible. So post questions anytime. I may not get to them until the end of my presentation, but if it's something that's relevant in the moment, I'll take care of it there. And as always, I am available on Twitter at @bball immersion to answer any questions beyond our time together. My DMs are open, so feel free to reach out to me and connect that way. I'm going to share my screen here just so we can get into some of the details of some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. And coaching the game while playing the game, and that's a broad topic, but I'm going to give you some practice examples of what I'm talking about, because I find the most challenging thing in connecting what I'm saying is for coaches to get a practical understanding of what I mean by a game's approach to coaching and how I actually coach within the context of the game. And that's the goal. Where I start from here is skills and decisions are interdependent, not independent. Do you agree or disagree? That's got to be something that you ask yourself at the end of this. Skills and decisions are interdependent, not independent. I share this thought a lot. When you use game-like offense versus defense drills with decisions, they are both player development and team development drills because you are coaching skills and decisions at the same time. And anytime you can put offense and defense together, you can develop and coach both sides of the ball. And this two-way coaching concept is something that I think is extremely valuable, not just for your players, but it's extremely valuable for you as a coach and your coaching development. So when I talk about this, I talk about this concept of teaching, connecting, and transfer. To me, what are you teaching? That's the what you're coaching. Hey, there's so many amazing ideas. I mean, there's no better time in learning from a basketball perspective than now. So many clinics online, so many concepts about what to coach. I'm not here to talk about what to coach. I'm here to focus on the how to coach. And that has to deal with connecting and transferring, making sure what we teach is connecting information for the player from practice to the game, and making sure that what we're coaching is transferring to help our players and help our team win or be successful or improve, depending on what the goals are within the context that you're coaching. The basics of all this teaching, connecting, and transferring, which I'll give you some examples, are that, in my opinion, and based on evidence, so my experience and based on evidence-based research around this concept of transfer in particular, it's very difficult to use simplified versions, 2-on-0, 1-on-0, 5-on-0, on-air drills, or repetitive predetermined outcome drills like a 3-man weave where players are mindless. It's very difficult to use simplified versions of drills and expect players to perform in the game with completely different perceptual demands. Completely different perceptual demands. And I'm going to come back to perceptual demands because that's the most important part of this. So you cannot expect as much transfer if you practice in an organized, perfect environment and you play in a random, messy, chaotic one. And it's random, messy, and chaotic because we're coaching human beings, but also because we don't control what the defense does. We don't control the environment often. So there's all these factors that make the game far less predictable than often we make practice. So if everything that we do in practice is very predictable, and then we put our athletes, our learners, in a unpredictable environment, we're less likely to have transfer and connection from practice to the game. And I'll get into this, but the main concept here is perception. So if I am a basketball player, when I execute a skill, executing the skill is actually the third part of the process. Before I execute a skill in practice or in game, I first perceive, so I go through perception. The second thing I do is I make a decision. I decide. The third thing I do is I execute a skill based on my perception and decision, often called perception action coupling, if you want to dive into the research. And then the fourth thing is I get feedback on what happened. So to me, we sometimes as coaches overemphasize or overfocus on the third part of that, which is actually skill execution. To me, so much of it comes back to perception and decision. And we're going to talk about how we frame that within a games approach and how we coach that. So right now, to play you the clip, there's volume to this clip, and you're going to watch a segment, a quick clip from my practice. So first things first, because everyone loves the drill. The drill is real simple. Coach starts with the ball under the rim. Coach starts with the ball under the rim, 4 or 5 or 3, whatever setup you want. Players are on offense on the perimeter and then on the interior. So in this example, we're 4 out, 1 in. The players on defense all start connected. So they're within the paint, they're within arm lengths of each other. The pass starts the live action. So we're working in theory here on a closeout on a contest, followed by defensive rebounding and offensive reaction. What we do is we can create the scenario that would work, and then from there we can coach it within the context of the game, and we can also allow it to continue based on a number of things. So right now the pass goes out. The rule is the player who catches the ball must shoot the ball. There's no option to pump fake. There's no option to pass. We call this 5-on-5 closeout rebounding. Obviously at younger levels, you can do it 3-on-3, 4-on-4, small sided game, whatever you want. But we do it 5-on-5 mostly because it gives more context to what we're going to do. So the shot goes up. From there, whatever happens, happens. So now I've set the condition. In this example, we're going to go 2 more trips. So we would call this 3 trips. The first trip was in the half court, and then we have 2 full court trips from there. So we're going to play 3 trips of the floor, and we're going to coach when necessary within that. And that's what I'm going to cover and get into here. So just watch it flow from there, and then I won't stop it. So we're into the next part. Get into actually coaching within the context of the game. So we're going to talk about the reasons. We're going to talk about the classroom management strategies and actually coaching. So when we play 5-on-5 and we're going to script a situation, maybe to start with exactly what we showed, maybe it's, hey, we're going to start with the first trip is wing ball screen, and we're going to work wing ball screen offense versus defense. And there, we're going to play full trips of the floor. We can either play Bader's decisions, or what we usually call quicks or gets, but you can script it and organize however you want within that. We could also say with more constraints, and constraints are things that shape learning. Constraints, the easiest way to understand them is, constraints is like going to the buffet. You take someone to the buffet and you say, listen, Matt, you can only eat at the salad bar. John, you can eat at the salad bar and you can eat at the pasta bar. This is using constraints in your practice to be able to shape learning. Your learners are at variable levels where they can handle variable things. So we can modify constraints for teams, for individuals, for groups, whatever necessary to be able to learn. Example, the constraints were that we had to run into two-side fast break. And the emphasis was to be able to skip in transition, which means to be able to get it to the opposite side. So we wanted to change sides of the floor in transition. And I'm happy to talk about that a little bit later if there's questions about that. What this all now, we are creating a game situation, and then we're going to use coaching interventions when necessary to be able to coach within the context of the game. So if we go back here, there's the hit ahead, and now there's the skip to the weak side. Okay, so let's talk about that now. You've listened to it, you've heard it, now let's talk about it. Number one, we want to recreate. So my commands in practice, my classroom management strategies, the commands that my players know that mean something when we're teaching. The first commands are either foul or hold. Foul means we're going to teach. We don't have fouls in practice. We don't call fouls in practice, separate and unrelated. But that word in our practice means we're going to teach. There's something we need to correct. There's something we need to intervene with. Hold would just mean hold the ball, no extra shots, no extra dribbles, that we're going to have teaching time. So use those ones kind of synonymously. But in this example, foul, recreate. Recreate means go back to the situation where the mistake happened. So in this example, where this player caught it with space, and I'll define that for you too. We define shot selection for our players relative to arm length advantage or more than arm length advantage, or less than arm length advantage. So if this player catches the ball and their defender is more than arm length away, then our first decision, our priority, we don't play with a triple threat, we play with one threat, and that's catch it to shoot it, that we want the player to shoot the ball. If they catch it with less than arm length advantage, then they are into secondary decisions, which could be extra pass, it could be a drive the closeout, it could be a dribble handoff, some different types of actions to be able to keep flow going and to play within our 0 seconds philosophy. 0 seconds essentially means that you're the most open you're going to get when you first catch the ball. So we want to keep that advantage. It's also in countering what we feel is our defensive philosophy, which is the defender's goal on this closeout, which they didn't do a good job here on, is to control the first second. So to control the first second of the catch of the offensive player. So to me, it's that back and forth of controlling the first second versus playing in 0 seconds. And 0 seconds is only possible. Application of a skill in 0 seconds philosophy is only possible if this player prior to catching the ball has gone through perception and decision, perception action coupling prior to catching the ball. If they do all this after they catch it, then clearly the defender has the advantage. And that's the importance of teaching perception and decision in that sense. So this player didn't shoot the ball. We wanted to emphasize to him and teach that we want him to shoot the ball. So foul, we need to teach. Recreate, go back to the situation we need to coach from. So we're going to go back to the skip because we feel like that's something that was the starting point in the understanding of perception and decision. And that was, where was your defender and what was your thought process? So on this, the skip The skip pass was the right decision. The player catching the ball struggled with their decision. So I would hold. And now after we recreate, I would first use questions. I would use questions to ask the player what their thought process was, what did they see, what were possibilities, all these things that go into this. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, that it's very difficult for me as a coach to coach with absolutes. Absolutes meaning this has to happen all the time. Like basketball is played in an open environment, so it's very difficult for me to say this has to happen all the time to a player. Because right now, you'll see, check for understanding or engage in thinking. Hey, what could have happened here? What should have happened here? The player said, I should have shot the ball. But I'm also going to, because I don't want it to be an absolute, say something very important here.
Right? He had on-length advantage. He's going to shoot it. When we dribble to nowhere. So shoot it. Right?
Or extra and play. So I want him to shoot the ball. That's our decision on the catch. Again, this is based on personnel a little bit for some of you clearly, but this player should have shot it. He's in range, he's in rhythm, but I also want to give him a possibility that if he doesn't catch it clean or he's not comfortable shooting it for whatever reason, there's an or. And that's what I mean about possibilities. Decision-making is developed best through possibilities, not through absolutes. Absolutes means you do this exact thing all the time. That's not decisions. Possibilities are decisions. Shoot it or extra pass. And we can play out of that situation in terms of that. So if I go back, and there's one more point I want to make here, and that is this. When we coach within the context of the game, and most of you can relate to this if you know anything about feedback patterns of delivery. Traditionally, what feedback has been to people and what research supported was this concept of the sandwich approach. The sandwich approach means that I say something positive, then I use correction or negative, could be negative, and then I say something positive again. You know, hey, Chris, I really like your hair, not so sure about your nose, but the shirt's really cool. To me, what that means for a learner is, and for a teacher, is that I ultimately don't know what the learner is going to internalize from that. So if I say, hey, listen, I really like your hair, maybe they're just going to be completely fixated on that and they won't get the rest of the message. So to me, feedback needs to be specific, meaning specific to an individual. Toloi, what was your thought process on the catch? Toloi, what was another possibility? So I can get him to understand, number one, I'm talking directly to him. And then number two, he is stimulated to be able to think and know exactly what I'm asking. Too often are non-specific, meaning it's not directed, or the individual doesn't know it's directed towards them, and it doesn't really give any value content information. So any valuable content information to the player. So I've tried over the last few years to move towards this, and I encourage you to try it and practice with it. This concept of keep and add in your feedback. Keep something. So if I was to give good feedback here, it would be, and I said this, keep the skip pass. Let's add the shot on the catch because we had arm length advantage. That's keep and add. So within your coaching, you can constantly think about ways to be able to communicate with keep and add. And if you're a parent or you're a teacher or even, you know, someone who's managing a workforce or whatever it may be, you can practice this, because I practice this all the time with my daughters, this concept of keep something and add something. It tends to frame the conversation as beneficial to the learner in terms of their development, and to make the correction less confronting in terms of it's not negative, it's to help us improve or to help our team win. And we constantly communicate that to our players. And again, I should go back and say from the beginning, you cannot coach with a games approach to coaching, or I feel in general, you can't coach effectively with any type of coaching unless you create a safe environment. So we will over communicate safety. That means we'll constantly communicate safety to our players in the sense that they can be wrong, they can make mistakes, they can answer questions wrong. So we want them to be safe, to be able to explore possibilities. And the one exception or the exceptions to that would be those things that you deem as absolutes. You have to be on time. That's an absolute. It's not a possibility that we're wrong with just that do not lead to decision making. So absolutes in certain areas, great. We've got to close out with 2 hands up every time. That's an absolute. That's cool. That's an absolute. If we want to develop decision making, then we have to think about it in terms of possibilities, in terms of those things. So you'll see us transition to the other end of the floor and see a few more teaching points in that, and then I'll get to questions. Okay, so in all of my travels throughout the world over the last 4 or 5 years, especially representing basketballimmersion.com and doing clinics, Sweden, New Zealand, presenting to NBA teams, college teams, everywhere I've been. So when I've got a chance to watch practices, I would say this is one of the #1 struggles for coaches at all levels, is that too often we give summary feedback or excellent feedback, and then we don't follow it with action. So that example would be, we recreate the situation and we start it right over again. So we go right back to skip pass and go. And now it's live from there. Instead of us going all the way back to the beginning and starting the trip over, we coach, hold within the context of the game, recreate, ask questions, give feedback, and that's all in a short period of time. This is less than, I mean, it seems long now because I'm talking a lot more, but this is all within the span of basically 15, 20 seconds. And then we recreate and we follow that feedback with action so that they can apply what we talked about. If you give feedback and don't give them a chance to apply the feedback, then they're less likely to connect the information to where they need to use it. And that's what I mean by follow feedback with action, is that helps with connection and transfer. We give them the feedback so they can connect it, and then we let them play. So here we go right into exact same player, exact same situation, and now this time he shoots the ball. So the question would be, should he have shot the ball? For me, we want to be over aggressive early. It would be to stop him again and coach him in this context and say, oh no, you shouldn't have shot the ball this time. That's confusing the learner. I can do video later. I can do private communications. I can do one-on-one communications within what we're proud of and what we're happy with. Coaches don't know what happened, but a little brief delay. Hopefully I'm still here with you. I don't know what the issue is.
Yeah, coach, it's looking like it's starting. The connectivity is having a brief issue.
Shoot. Do you want me to keep going or do you want me to?
I'm getting you back now. If for the last like 20, 30 seconds, it was really coming in and out. I'm hearing you clearly now.
Okay, well, let's go. Coaches, I apologize. And, we'll try and get back to this. We'll go back to restarting here. So when we actually restart now, what I said, if you missed this over the last 20, 30 seconds, and I'll just redo it, is now the player caught it in the exact same situation, which wasn't by design. This was organic. It happened this way. But now this player shot the ball. Whether they should have shot the ball or not, I am not going to stop now to confuse the learner. This would be video, a one-on-one conversation, some type of maybe intervention within practice to be able to get him to be able to think about whether this should have been a one more, this should have been a dribble hand off, this should have been a try to score, or this should have been, again, shoot the ball. I much prefer coaches, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just coming in and out, coach. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have 5 bars, it looks like, but yeah, I know it's more complex than that.
Yeah, I see that on yours as well. So I don't know. Do you want us here? I'll let you know if you want to try one more time. It's coming in now, and then I think maybe, coach, if you want to go without the screen sharing, it seems like when the screen shares in the video, that's what seems to be overwhelming it. I'm not sure otherwise.
Cool.
Then I'll jump in if it starts lagging pretty bad again.
Okay, well, let me start with some questions and stuff like that. Like I kind of in the first part got through the basics, coaches. Again, I'm happy to redo this and post it or whatever it may be in terms of that as well with that. So let me go back to Coach Trotter's question, which is, with things being so random, is there anything that you do think is important to be predictable for your players? Yes, absolutely. There are absolutes. There are things that are predictable for your players. So let's give an offensive example first. This applies to defense first, or to defense as well. And that is, I am a big believer in structure to unstructured. So if you want to think about offense, I provide them a template. It could be a spacing template, like the 2-side fast break, where the spacing template is, we've got to get 2 players, corner and 45. We've got to get a player to a dunker spot. Let's say we're going to run to 4 out, 1 in, and then we've got to fill top and then the opposite corner. there's a spacing template. So that structure allows players to be more free and creative. So you teaching defense and you teaching principles on defense and things that should happen. I would never say it in terms of absolutes, but coaches would say there should. How many times do you watch your defensive clips in the edit and say, wow, we played 100% perfect defense? Well, no. Often it relates to your players figured it out, but they can't figure it out from just rolling out the ball. They have to figure it out progressively from a movement from structure to unstructure. So any decision making follows this constraints-led approach, where let's say I'm teaching a player how to make decisions or reads off of a ball screen. The concept would be when they come off the ball screen, we would focus on, let's play 2-on-2 ball screen, and the defender, the constraint is they have to chase. The player that's defending the screen can do whatever they want, let's say. But we've removed one of the decisions, so the player with the ball can focus on decisions versus the screener's defender, because they know the defender's chasing them. They know they're going to curl or try and curl the screen, but it's all relative to now one decision. We could throw them right in the deep end and have them go, okay, let's go live 2-on-2 ball screen. And then from there, decide what do we actually need to teach? What do they struggle with? What do we need to teach? In my opinion, that's better, even if it was slow learning, even if it was filled with errors, because they're getting a better task representation of what they have to do, So that's ultimately my goal as a coach, is to learn what I need to teach rather than predetermine what I am going to teach them. Because then when we go through this progression of 1-on-0 ball screen, 2-on-0 ball screen, 2-on-1 ball screen, 2-on-2 ball screen, 3-on-3 ball screen, 4-on-4, 5-on-5, etc., we just waste a lot of time. We waste valuable time where I'm not sure if what I'm doing is connecting and transferring for my players to help them learn in the game. Here's what we know transfers from basketball practice to game performance. What we know transfers 100% is playing basketball. Offense versus defense, basketball transfers to the game. What we don't know is any on-air drill transfers anything to the game. And the reason is that all of the evidence-based research, sports scientists, learning theorists, whoever it is, who study learning or study this concept of transfer, they all relate it to this concept of perception. Is that perceptual demands are the most important thing that leads to transfer. That's over any biomechanical skill that I can teach them. I can spend all my time on a biomechanical skill, but what's most important is this perception action coupling that leads to transfer. Because think about it. If I teach my team a 5-on-0 play, and all we ever do is that play 5-on-0 for 20 minutes every practice, and then we go play the game, I'm imagining that 5-on-0 played on now suddenly against 5-on-5 is going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess because now they have different visual stimuli and perceptual demands, distracting information presented by the defender, than they ever had in practice. Because we never had that in practice, now they have to essentially relearn it in a game. So what I say to coaches is, okay, it's going to be messy when you go 5-on-5 anyways, even if you've done 5-on-0 first. So my concept is start with hard first instruction, start with 5-on-5, and then from there, learn what you need to break down. If you need to go back to 5-on-0, and 5-on-0 is fine, there's nothing wrong with it, but go back to 5-on-0 with this concept of giving them this structure from which they can now go back and play more free or less predictable, whatever that may be. So that would be it. Coach Michael, when you say recreate, sorry, last question. When you say recreate, do you guide the players into recreating the situation where the mistake happened, or do you allow them to try and recreate the situations themselves? The goal would be that they know eventually, this doesn't start there, but some of my veterans that have played for multiple years, they would know. So as soon as I said foul or hold, often a veteran would know immediately the mistake or where to recreate. They have become error detectors and error correctors on their own. So they are able to identify the mistake and then obviously recreate the situation. But for new learners or newcomers, this would be a big struggle. So often they would need my guidance to go back to where we recreate. But often, as in that situation, I would say hold, recreate, go back to the skip pass, and then they would go back to the skip pass. All I would have to do from there often is to get the defenders to understand where they were or where they should be, because that's the value of this coaching them within the context of the game. Is it's two-way coaching. I'm coaching offense and defense at the same time. So recreate, go back to the skip pass, and then you'll often see that the defender on the weak side will just hang with their check. Well, we want them to get a context too. So we'll say, hey, listen, Johnny, where should you be in help when the ball's there in that skip pass position? And we would have in and out weak side coverage. So we'd want to know who is the in defender and who's the out defender. And I can two-way coach this. The other value of two-way coaching for you coaches is that you coach the game two ways. Like when I actually coach in a real game, I'm not coaching on air. I'm not coaching three-man weave. I'm not coaching anything that's predictable. So me doing more live offense versus defense in practice, I believe helps me more as a coach improve my game coaching, identifying situations, identifying potential struggles, because I'm used to coaching it more within practice. So yes, you'll probably end up recreating the situation more often than not, Coach Michael. Coach Jeff, when you ask questions, what do you want? What do you do when they answer, I don't know? Okay, number one, this is an outstanding question, by the way. So here's the thing. Jeff, what was your thought process? I have to pause. I have to have a delay. And that delay is uncomfortable for coaches, and I'm poor at it, always have been, because we're so focused on intensity, we're so focused on pace, we're so focused on effort that we don't give players time to think. So when I ask questions, I try to intentionally delay. And you heard that when I said, to the player, and then pause, let them think. And then if they don't know the answer, one is I talked about communicating safety, trying to normalize the fact that you won't always have the answer. I don't want them to just guess. I do want them to think. I do want them to possibly throw out ideas, but I can always save them by going to another player and as much as possible normalize the fact that they won't know all the answers. So I don't know is equally as important as I do know, because it means there's something I haven't connected for them as a coach, or they haven't connected for themselves as a player. So I need to do a better job connecting that situation. So I don't know. By the way, if you get your players to the point where they will say, I don't know, then that shows great humility and intent to learn. And that is an excellent learning environment. That's a good learning environment where they're okay saying, I don't know. Because as we know, too many coaches make that unacceptable. What do you mean you don't know? How do you not know? I know everything. And that's the problem, right? I do know everything. I know, but the point is, I don't play. You need to know. You need to know, you need to know, and that's what's important. A really good question in terms of that. Coach Mark, I love the communication within practice. Do you have any more cues? Foul, recreate, keep an out is more of a communication cue, but we go foul, hold, recreate, and then from there, questions. It's not really a communication cue, but they know that questions are being asked of them. And again, I don't surprise them. They don't go into the year and go, oh my gosh, he's asking questions. We make sure that they know that I'm asking questions, because we talk about it at the beginning of the year. We talk about this as an important part of the learning process. We talk about the importance of them not being mindless and them being mindful and thinking. So I will engage them in questions and Q&A. And from our film sessions to our practice, we do it. Here's the most important part of questions. And again, you have to normalize this behavior. This isn't comfortable for newcomers in our program. It's not comfortable for any level of player. Not comfortable for my daughter. I cold call. Cold calling is this, that I'm just going to ask someone a question. Mark, what's the answer? I am not going to ask for participation. We know what happens when we ask for participation. We cannot guarantee in those situations that everyone is thinking. If I cold call, that means I put people on the spot. Then I know that even if they don't get the answer right, I know that next time they will be more prepared. The best teacher I ever had was the one that I was scared every day to show up in class. In class every single day, I was prepared because she cold called. And I worried every single day that I wasn't going to be prepared if she asked me a question, because I wanted to get the answer right. I wanted to know what I was doing, right? So that's a part of this process, to create this environment where they know they're going to be asked questions and they know they're going to be responsible for their learning. We phrase it this way, that players are active participants in the learning process. I will call them learners, and I will call them active participants in the learning process. This is a two-way thing. Teaching and learning is two ways. It's not just me to them. It's them to me to them, and this whole circular process. They teach me, I teach them, and vice versa, right? That's part of this environment that we're trying to do. Template, a skeleton, great. There's probably other synonyms for that coaches use, but there's no question, and research supports this, by the way, that memorizing something can lead to you being more free. The problem is too many coaches spend way too much time in memorization. We do 5-on-0 offense every practice. Well, that's great. I'm not anti 5-on-0 offense. I'm anti 5-on-0 offense every practice because you're taking time away from things that actually connect and transfer to the game. But my players being able to perfectly run a play 5-on-0 doesn't help us in the game. So, but them being comfortable with the pattern and having the pattern memorized, hey, that's positive, because that gives them a template for freedom. And that's a part of this process. What's up, Coach Hugo? How do you balance stopping the action to teach bad decisions versus being comfortable with the mess and allowing your team to fix mistakes on the floor? Hey, that's the art and science of this. That is the art and science of coaching. This is mainly the art. You have to have a feel for it. You have to have a feel for how many times you can stop it and still get your points across. Now, early in the season, I am more likely to stop it for literally everything that I feel is important. I'll go into practice and I'll have my list of things that we're focused on, but generally what I'll do is I'll stop it more often than not. But think about this. I have my practices basically filled with dessert the whole practice. How many of you like dessert? Well, I do. I love dessert. Well, for me, why can't I eat dessert at the beginning of the meal? Why can't I eat dessert for the whole meal? Why do I have to wait for the end of practice to play 5-on-5 or to play offense versus defense? To me, our whole practice is 5-on-5. Our whole practice is offense versus defense. So my players literally get to play basketball for a whole practice. The trade-off is, and the explanation is, well, that's cool, but I'm going to coach you within 5-on-5. I'm going to coach you within the context of the game. So we're going to hold, we're going to recreate, and I'm going to coach you so that we help you improve within the context of the game. That's difficult. That is a struggle for a lot of players initially, but when they start to figure it out and they start to get comfortable with it, they love it because they're playing basketball. It's not a drill, it's playing basketball. And I'll talk about reconnections here if I can, but the art of when to coach it is really important. Now, the other part of it is if you want to use Ricky Rubio, let's say Ricky Rubio as an example. So you have a player like that is creative and skilled and confident. When he makes a bad decision, it probably comes from him trying to find a really creative solution. It's not him making a bad decision. It's him seeing a possibility, but he wasn't able to execute it. There's a big difference between that and, say, a player that just makes constant bad decisions from being unskilled. And that's where skill and decisions and skills interconnect. Look, my thing is, I believe the decision is more important than the skill, because at the end of the day, I don't care how you finish the layup. I just care that you made the right decision to shoot the layup because you had an advantage. But we are definitely aware, and I am all in, That skill helps you complete the decision. So that's usually what it comes back to is, did they make the right decision and not have the proper skill to execute it? Or do they have the skill and they didn't make the right decision based on their skill set? And those things are questions that you come back to. And as you can imagine, that's highly variable and highly specific within your practices. So that's a huge, huge part of it. Coach Pat, most people have assistants. If and when I am by myself, any hints to help two-way coaching when alone? Absolutely. I two-way coached for my whole career. Never had a full-time assistant at the collegiate level, had different coaches there every practice, or sometimes none. Often did it. So it is hard. Don't get me wrong. It is hard. But you will become better at it the more you practice, and you will be amazed how much you attune to what's important. So for skill, for expertise, so this movement from a non-expert to an expert, again, based on research, the one key thing that stands out to me if we're talking about a LeBron James versus another player in the NBA, or a really high-level coach versus a developing coach, one of the most important distinctions between a non-expert and an expert is the ability to distinguish between what is important and what is unimportant. So the skill of a really expert level coach is not that they attune themselves to everything. It's that they only attune themselves to what's important. And that can only be developed, in my opinion, through an excessive amount of experiential learning and practice and a ton of film study. That's where you develop these chunking strategies and these different ideas to be able to become better at identifying what's important. And that's a great question, because that obviously ties into what Hugo asked as well, Pat. But it is difficult. It is very difficult. To me, I always tried to assign my assistants certainly to different responsibilities, but then I also thought I'm doing a disservice to them and their development if I have them only looking at rebounding. So I wanted them to be two-way coaches as well, because I feel like, again, I'm responsible for their development. I know that might not be the same for a lot of coaches, but to me, that has a big impact on kind of how they develop. What's up, Coach Scott? Within your offense, is each spot on the court spacing have specific actions on the read? For example, is reversed or skipped to a 45 slot, or is so I guess this relates, Scott, if I understand, a little bit towards automatics, if there are certain automatics. And the answer is no, I wouldn't call it an automatic. That's why I've used and constantly use the term possibilities. So we can rank possibilities. Look, in this situation, here's our preference, but here are the other possibilities. So we want this to happen, but if this doesn't happen, then this and this. So to me, I try and phrase decision-making in those ways, because we all have players that we need to constrain. That means we have a non-shooter in that exact situation I showed you where they caught it with a skip. That non-shooter catches the ball, then they have a different progression of reads, which is how we phrase it, progression of reads, than a player who could shoot the ball. Their progression of reads would be drive to score, because I'm assuming they can either shoot it or drive it. And if not, then I've got bigger problems, right? If they're just a passer, and I know we have that more and more, you know, at the lower levels, high school and different types of lower levels, where there's certain players that are playing multiple sports and they come off football and then they're in basketball practice and they're not skilled basketball players. But that to me is progression of reads, and that relates to they have different possibilities, or maybe that's my constraint buffet example where they can only do A. You know, Scott, if you're a non-shooter, non-dribbler, and you catch the ball, you can only do A. But you know what, Mark, you're skilled, you're a player, you can do A is my preference, and if not, then you can do B or C. And that's the example of coaching players within constraints. And I would never apologize for constraining things, one, because it shapes learning and helps players improve, but two, it also is very direct in terms of explaining to players that the number one thing that trumps everything for an individual player is skill. Skill equals confidence. Skill equals confidence. You want to have more fun playing the game? You want to be more confident playing the game? Get more skilled. Bam, get more skilled. It's that simple. And that's what I think is incredibly important for us to coach. I'll try and go a little quicker here, but how, Coach Mark, how do you keep intensity within guided defense, offense drills to connect from on-air drills to small-sided games? Okay, intensity. So intensity is a tricky word here in terms of that, but let's give me an example, which I think will apply to this. I believe slow learning 3-on-3 is better than fast learning 3-on-0. So if you can get your players to go really intense and really fast 3-on-0, I believe that doesn't help them as much as going 3-on-3 slow learning, because the perceptual demands and the decision-making demands are there, that they understand the context of what you're teaching them. To me, that example, if you're familiar with VO2 max and different ratios like that, it'd be about 60% VO2 max. That'd be, you can jog and talk comfortably. That would be an example of slow learning pace. To me, there's more value to that. Now, we don't want to stay there, but we do want to be there for a lot of learning, because that helps them get it. So if I teach a play 5-on-5, we'll go 5-on-5. Blues get 5 reps, whites get 5 reps, and then we'll try and go live from there. But the first 5 reps for both teams are slow learning reps, but it's offense versus defense, because they'll have context. But more importantly, the defense will have context. So we can coach the defense at the same time. Listen, they're running a back screen. You know how we defend that. Why aren't we defending that? This is a perceptual rep, and that's what slow learning is. So to me, when you talk about guided defense or offensive drills with guided or vice versa, then that's what I mean by that, is that slow learning. So I would try and, as much as possible, do that. Now, in terms of connect, I prefer the term reconnect. So we would go through this whole process. And if you're a member of basketballimmersion.com, I just posted this video, which talks about reconnections from a clinic I did previously. But reconnections are what I call drills. So if my players are struggling with pivoting, I am not going to start practice with 2-on-0 pivoting and passing. In fact, I don't want to do that at all. I'm only going to do 2-on-0 pivoting if I feel like I need to reconnect my players to some skill that they're deficient in. And then as much as possible, I want to connect that back to the context of the game. So say we were playing 3-on-3, drive, dead, working on second cut. That means penetration reaction, but now you're dead and now getting out of trouble. That's what we call second cuts. Well, we're working on that. We're struggling with the pivoting and passing and finding someone. Okay, hold, 2-on-0 passing, go, boom, 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 maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes. Okay, we reconnect. This is why we're doing it. This is what we're doing. This is what we need to get better at, boom, boom, boom. Okay, now back to the 3-on-3, follow feedback with action. That's how we would kind of do those on-air drills, not as starting points, but as reconnections to get players to understand what they could do better. Coach Hector, how much advantage, disadvantage do you play to build their decision-making? Will it depend? So I don't think it depends on the level of player. I'll say that first. I think age appropriate at all levels, all levels. And you hit it on the head. This is the main part of everything that I share on Basketball Immersion in our membership community is this advantage, disadvantage concept. It's really hard for players to get into decision-making situations when it's equals 3-on-3. So whether you keep an advantage or you start with an advantage, there's a decision to be made on offense or defense, and this is defensive decision-making as much as anything, to be able to learn how to compensate or to take advantage of advantage. So we want to, as much as possible, when we're talking about developing decisions and skills, we're talking about advantage, disadvantage drills. And we had an NBA organization over the last month join Basketball Immersion, and their number one takeaway was those advantage, disadvantage situations that stimulate decision-making. They stimulate this decision-making process, and to get players to be able to, again, get out of a non-traditional drill in terms of, 1-on-0, 2-on-0, 3-on-0 buildup, and get right to, okay, we're going to give the advantage to the offense, and we're going to play 3-on-2 out of this situation, and then we're going to script and organize the exact situation we're going to work on, and now decisions are going to evolve from that. to me, we're doing a disservice to youth players if we're not doing those drills from the get-go. Because honestly, I think, again, the decision is what holds them back. The decision is what holds them back. The skill will progressively build over time, and I have a whole philosophy on that, but I believe that so much skill development is player-led, and that we spend majority of our practices as coaches on offense versus defense or advantage disadvantage. That provides more value to a player in their development than us spending it on one-on-0 dribbling. They need to do one-on-0 dribbling, and we need to create an environment where they're motivated to do one-on-0 dribbling on their own, in my opinion, in terms of those things. So that's that in terms of that. I don't know if there's more questions here. I'm certainly happy to continue to answer them. I had a few links that I was going to share. I'm not sure where I do that in terms of that to help direct some of your learning and some of your thinking. So if I've got a second here, let me just share a few things. But as I said, at B-Ball Immersion, probably a lot of you follow me, which I'm grateful for. Thank you for the support with that. At B-Ball Immersion on Twitter, please reach out, DM me, or even give a shout out to this clinic, the Basketball Embassy, Coach Tube, etc. Give them a shout out. It's a lot of work for them to be able to put this thing together. So please support them and support me in terms of this process. And I appreciate that as well. For me, if you are not a member of our Basketball Immersion community, then please, again, DM me. I have a coupon code for you. DM me or email me, coliver@basketballimmersion.com. I'm happy to provide you. I know a lot of people are going through a lot of stuff at this time of year. So happy I created a discount code for that exact reason. So DM or email me, coliver@basketballimmersion.com, and I'm happy to connect that as well. And then if you're interested in more of these ideas, I have a free webinar, basketballimmersion.com/learn more. Just go there and you'll learn BDT shooting, and all these concepts of variable and random practice. And again, I can't thank you enough for taking some time to be able to listen to this, and apologize for the video and the lag time with that.
Thank you so much, Coach. It's greatly appreciated. That was awesome stuff. Thank you so much, and best of luck. And we'll definitely be shooting your information out, Coach. And if you want our help disseminating information, we can also shoot that at the end of this, because everyone's information will be put on here.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Dustin.
All right, Coach. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Are we on?
No, I think I put you as the in charge now, so you just have to put in the bottom right corner.
Okay.